Okay, it's Friday, September 23rd. This is a pre-opening SPY video. We have about 2 hours to go before the open, so a lot of time still to go, but you can see here our pre-market range is gapping down big. Here's the action so far. We're so far near the bottom of the range. We'll see where this ends up 2 hours from now. So clearly, if let's assume we stay lower here, the SPY is down 45 points right now. The Dow Jones is down over 300. We're gapping down big. So as always, we're going to have to, see if that presents a tricky opportunity at the open to continue lower. You know the way from my videos, I'm looking at the opening price action relative to this range. We're going to have to really break below that to sustain lower. We're going to have to break above that if we wanted to sustain higher, which it doesn't look like that's going to happen, although you could get a big green bar to start, and we'll have to see if we get some kind of reversal signal to really stay in line with the big picture trend. And of course, we're below the midpoint of yesterday, so there's no real up bias, but the question is it going to be tricky after a big gap down to get continuation? So the main point here, we'll look for that I'll just point out here, is not so much what we're going to do today, but a couple of main points are, number one, this big gap down here, if it sustains itself at the open, is reaching all our targets on the let's look at the weekly chart. We've been talking about this for a while. There are these stops down here that we were always targeting, and that's going to be hit open. And then the question is, and I think quite frankly, given that we're broadening higher on the weekly chart here in the bigger picture, we're going to broaden below that June low in the bigger picture as well as we head down. That's what's happening next. And at that point, you see whether this big broadening up and broadening down could possibly start some kind of reversal. With this all lines up with, again, on the monthly chart, again, looking time frame to time frame to time frame, multiple time frames. We had the failure here on the green bar to the upside, and we had the two down, so that always projected to the bottom of that range. The question is, once we hit that, are we going to possibly then fail on the downside and start back up, kind of like we did here to the downside, or are we going to possibly continue? And if we continue, our next targets now are this big green bar, and that gets down to the 3,200 area. Again, I'm not predicting that, but that's kind of where, if we can broaden out here and not reverse, then we are starting to look at these targets down here in the months ahead. But that's bigger picture stuff at the moment. For now, we reached our target. That was the high probability. And I guess in terms of, since it's kind of tricky, in other words, in terms of the day trading, that's just day to day. But really what was developing in here all along, when I was talking about it, was from the weekly chart to the monthly chart, we were targeting lower prices. And if you wanted to be more of a position trader, it was relatively, even though there was some volatility in play, the play was to be kind of holding short towards these targets. Now that we've reaching them, and I still think there's one more to go, you just have to, it's going to be tricky in terms of what you get here in terms of sustained move to the downside, at least for a while. A lot of times when you hit your targets, you at least pause, if nothing else, and then you determine whether you're broadening and failing and heading back the other way, or you're just going to broaden and continue. And that's kind of the final point I wanted to bring up here, that maybe is more important than what today is all about, is just what you generally want to look for, on these charts is when you get broadening formations on a shorter time frame, you look for either failures or continuations. And if you broaden out, like here's a broadening out to the downside that doesn't reverse, and a 3-bar, in other words, then you can you look for continuation on the bigger picture chart, and that's what's developing here. So as price was broadening out lower here and couldn't reverse on the daily chart, on the weekly chart, you feel comfortable you're still heading to those targets. And the same thing here on the monthly chart. If we broaden out here and can't reverse, then we're going to be comfortable we're heading down to that target. So that's just a concept I wanted to bring up. You'd say, well, how are we going to reverse this back to the upside? Anyone who's really thinking about it. I still think the odds are you're broadening, given this price action here, you're broadening out to the downside here first before you can even begin to think long, but we'll find out if that happens. But then you get some cases here where eventually on the weekly chart you might broaden to the upside, get a 2-up, hit this target, and then you can see some pivot machine gun kind of plays here. So that was pretty likely you were going to hit that target, and then you broadened up here. Obviously you got the reversal to the downside, and then you started working lower. Then the question is, once you came to the lower end of the thing and you didn't reverse to the upside, then you're looking at broadening action on a bigger time frame. If I went to the monthly chart to see where some of your targets were, so you're always looking at these various time frames, how they broaden out in the short run, if they fail or continue, and then that kind of leads you to where price might be going in the higher time frame, and that's kind of the point being in play here. And that's why even on these daily broadenings to the upside, we still never got weekly action here that took out some targets, and therefore once we failed on the downside on the daily charts, we were still keeping the weekly charts in mind. And quite frankly, I can show you how that also translated to the monthly charts, where we were then looking for targets below. So that's a tricky topic. Someday maybe I'll make a video on that, because you got to kind of judge what's happening. But in order for this to really reverse to the upside here, we're going to see some kind of broadening to the upside. We're going to have to see that fails. Then at that point to then reverse and come lower. We're going to have to see how that relates to the weekly chart starting to broaden to the upside. That also fails to go lower, and then that will all of a sudden set up weekly targets to the upside. And once we get weekly targets to the upside, we'll see if the monthly targets go to the upside. So that's kind of the introduction to all that. But anyway, pretty clear that we were heading down here to these lower targets. The monthly chart was the main one in play. We're going to reach those targets today, and now we're just going to have to really go forward and see at what point you can get future continuation versus the signs of some kind of reversal. And a reversal is going to take a while to form. Even this move up here, if you look at it on the weekly chart, that eventually worked to that broadening action up to the top here. It took a lot of volatility in the day time frame here, a lot of broadenings both ways before eventually you realized that this area was not going to broaden lower. We were going to broaden higher and then work towards that target. So, you can see here on the weekly chart, we're nowhere near forming all that. I don't think you're going to get one big, especially with this big red bar. It's not like any 2-up bar all of a sudden is going to have an easy target to get up there. It's going to have a lot of consolidation somewhere down here. And eventually at some point, we are going to see something that breaks to the upside and then targets this area, or in this case, targets this area and this area. But, we could be on the monthly chart heading all the way down here first. So that's kind of the concept here. And that's why it was kind of clear that we were heading lower the whole time with that bias. That's the main point I'm making. And for those of you who had more position trades and followed this all the way down, congratulations. But on the day time frame, there were good opportunities too. So let's just see where we open today. I mean, where this range ends up today and how price opens and what the end of the week kind of brings us.